G'day and thanks for joining us for another Australia Talks. I'm DK and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host Ardeet. Today is Thursday, the 16th of April, 2026, and our topics this week are the Prime Minister has headed off to Asia to shore up our fertilizer and fuel supplies, and he has had some luck. And BYD is tripling its shipment volume of electric vehicles to Australia. Of course, we have our Toowoomba Town Talk, then we'll jump into This Week in Australian History, and we'll finish off, as always, with the Forex Bottle Top Trivia. But before we get into all of that, let's catch up with the last week. Ardeet, hello. How was the rest of the International Melbourne Comedy Festival? Was it as good as it was when we spoke last week?
Yes, in fact, it panned out very well. I ended up seeing 23 shows, which was a bit of a mammoth effort, even by my normal sort of standards. Mind you, we did end up having nine nights up there. We were originally only going to be up there for, I think it was 6, and we had to cancel a holiday later in the year. We thought, oh, bugger it, let's spend a bit longer up here. So yeah, look, it's really well organised. It's fun how many, like the city's sort of just filled with places doing comedy, lots of people out and about. The crowds were really good, and by that I mean even on some, like I went to a number of predominantly shows, like a single person, or there was one the Work Hates podcast, which had a few people on stage. But I also went to some of the best of the festival, or best festival club, or that, where they have a whole lot of people, 5, 7, or 10 comedians, typically in a place where people sort of can get up and have drinks and that. And oftentimes in those situations, people can get a little bit rowdy and a bit heckly, which does frustrate me. But even on the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, at least in the shows I went to, the crowds were good. There was no really irritating people, which I like. Because I think if I'm going along, I want to hear the comedian. I don't want to hear someone in the crowd. Yeah, look, I mean, I don't mind someone making a silly comment, particularly if it hits. And if it doesn't hit, I like when the comedian will sort of turn things on them. But no, I feel like compared to the last couple of years, not that people were sort of super rowdy, but there was sort of good behaviour in the crowd, but there was still a lot of participation and energy in most of the shows, which you do need. And it was one of the things I do like is seeing the same person, like in these compilations ones, I'll see the same person say twice doing their routine. Didn't see it 3 times this year, though I have in the past, and I really like seeing how they change some of their things depending on the audience, or they've obviously had a think about it, because it's one of those things that a lot of people, if you're not much into comedy, you'll typically turn up and you'll think, oh, this bloke's thought up a couple of good jokes and he's got up there and he knows how to tell them. Glad I caught him while he was in form tonight. That was pretty good. But if you sort of get into it a little bit more, you understand that all that sort of stuff that seems so off the cuff and ad lib is really very strictly scripted. There's a lot of structure to good comedy, and I like seeing how they change it round, how they shorten or lengthen some bits, or just will use a different take on a joke. So. Yeah, and look, sorry if you're not a big comedy person. Sorry if I've just ruined it for you. There is obviously there is the ad lib, there is the sort of reacting to it, but there's a lot of the stuff that you sort of think, oh, they just thought that up on the spot. That no, they didn't. They've workshopped that over dozens of shows. So yeah, look, sorry, that's the reality of it. So really enjoyed that. Look, got to the end, and we sort of thought, oh, I'm happy to go back home now. But yeah, it was good. I finished off with there's a woman, Kate Dolan, and her thing was trout, and she. It's a little bit of sort of an introspective about herself and, self-perception and body image and social thing in that. I did find that the female comedians would go a little bit more sort of, a little bit introspective and a little bit more, like add a little bit more to the show. They might sort of, say, sing or perform or something. But I saw a lot of female comedians this year and enjoyed pretty much all of them. In fact, my top 10 is a mix of male and female. So there's some good ones there. But yeah, she was fun. It was just one of these ones I thought, oh look, it was bizarre enough, and her doing a dance with the trout head on and her timing and odd little things. I thought that was a nice way to finish off the festival. So I didn't even bother going out for a third show that night. I thought, finish on a high. So
that's good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. So yeah, turned out to be a good festival. So what about you? How'd your week go?
I have been just super busy. It's been school holidays here this week, and there's nothing more exhausting than coming home after a very busy day to a bunch of extremely rowdy kids that have been cooped up inside or just fed lollies, and they're just having a great time. And look, you don't want to rain on anyone's parade, you don't want to upset anyone or anything like that, and of course it is exhausting also looking after said children throughout the day, but when you come home, it's not exactly the thing that you look for some peace and quiet. But look, school holidays are nearly coming to an end. It is great. It's great family time. Love it. But at the same time, I also like when they come to an end, which is Monday. They're back at school, which is
right.
Which is nice in of itself as well. But I also over the weekend I went and bought a couple of particularly large wrenches off a lovely gentleman, and it's funny.
Wrenches?
Yeah, like big ones. I think the smallest one was 38 inches. And
wow.
The big one, which was 46, if I'm remembering correctly, he said to me, he was like, what are you going to do with it? And I was like, this one? No idea, but I just really want it. But the reason I brought this up wasn't just to brag about my huge wrenches. It was funny because you start talking to essentially this man was a stranger. He was selling a thing, and I went and bought it, right? And we started getting talking, and it's funny how you can end up striking up like a really good brief sort of friendship with someone. Particularly, I feel like this is quite easy for men over things like tools and interests and hobbies and things like that. And so I had a really, really good afternoon having a chat with this older fella who's semi-retired, downscaling, clearing out the shed. The wife's told him he needs to scale back all his tools and things like that. And sort of throughout this conversations, he ended up he gave me a couple of things, and I bought a couple of other things off him, and he was sort of like, oh, well, what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And there's always something nice about when you're getting rid of stuff in a situation like that, where to sell it or give it to someone that will appreciate it and will use it and will love it in the way that you have. There's something special about that. So basically what I want to say, if you get an opportunity just to talk to some of the people that are around you in your life, be kind to people. I'm assuming you all are anyway, but you never really know where things are going to take you. And just one of these weird little, I'm going to drop in here on my way to somewhere else to just pick this thing up, turns into an afternoon of chatting and reminiscing with a dude that, He's still a stranger at the end of the day, but we had a good time, and we sort of talked about some stuff, and I learned a few things as well. So if you get an opportunity,
that's great.
Yeah, if you get an opportunity, don't be afraid to strike up a conversation with a stranger, because you never know where it's going to take you. And a lot of people are particularly interested in talking about themselves and their things and stuff like that. So if you get an opportunity, why not? Have a chat, have a yarn. Go out and meet some people. Why not?
Yeah. And look, you can always pretend you've got a notification on your phone if you think, oh, that was a mistake. I had some good ones, but no, misjudged that one. And just sort of a buzz and a quick look at your phone and go, oh, sorry, I'll have to wrap this up in a tick. Because, you can't tell. Nowadays, when your phone goes off, it doesn't make that old-fashioned that you used to get. It's just sort of
That's true.
People think, oh, they must have got a notification because that's how my phone works.
Yep.
But
yep.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's true. And actually, you do bring up a good point. I'm a pretty big dude, so it's obviously probably a bit easier for me to feel safe in an environment like that. But, keep your wits on you, as always. But at the same time, don't be afraid to have a chat. There's a lot of cranky old blokes out there that are actually soft as teddy bears once you get chatting with them. And you'll be surprised. They can teach you a few things. So
Yeah. That's funny. My brother was a big person for that. He'd strike up conversations and have people would tell him, open up to him, telling his stories. He was likable. I'm biased because he was my brother, but he was just great at that, getting people to tell their story, and it was always something that I sort of envied a bit when I was younger and didn't have that level of confidence, but also desire to do it, because you would see him sometimes think, God, he's just met that person, he's having a good old laugh and good time. So I've gotten better over it at the years, but yeah, it was there is a skill set there.
Yes, there is. You're right. Not everyone can do it, but like I said, if you get an opportunity, why not have a chat, see what's going on. Speaking about cranky old men wanting to have a chat, our Prime Minister has headed to Asia to shore up fertilizer and fuel supplies. This comes on the back of the 31st. If we could rewind a couple of weeks, some weeks feel like years, and the last couple certainly have felt that way. If we rewind back just over 2 weeks to the 31st of March, Agriculture Minister Julie Collins announced the establishment of the Fertilizer Supply Working Group, which brings together key government agencies and two industry organisations, that is Fertilizer Australia and the National Farmers Federation. The group's urgent task was to secure fertiliser supplies for Australia's large-scale agricultural sector, as the country imports approximately 2/3 of its urea from the Middle East, where shipping routes through the Strait of Hormuz are basically completely paralysed. If you hadn't heard, there's some stuff going on, and I think you should read the news.
Yeah. In fact, pause the podcast now and just catch up on the news. You might be surprised.
There's quite a few things going on that you probably need to be a little bit aware of.
God, wouldn't it be funny if someone didn't realise that and paused the closet? Oh my God.
Timing has become critical. Urea demand peaks in April and June for planting and top-dressing winter crops such as canola, barley and wheat. And if sufficient fertiliser cannot be secured before then, many farmers will be forced to reduce their wheat acreage, switch to barley because of its lower fertiliser requirements, or plant legumes that consume less nitrogen. And some legumes actually help fix it in the soil. So, what is urea and why do the plants like it? Put it simply, urea is the most used nitrogen fertilizer. It is a synthetic compound that is critical for producing high yields out of many crops that are grown here in Australia, such as the aforementioned wheat, barley, and oats. So, In the context of all of this, we need the fertilizer to grow the things that we eat. Prime Minister Albanese has embarked on a whirlwind tour of Asia in a bid to secure ongoing supply of Australia's most essential crop fertilizer. Facing the potential threat of a hit to crop yields in the coming months, Prime Minister Albanese set his sights on Brunei on Wednesday. So yesterday, as of recording, the Prime Minister met Brunei Sultan Haj Halal Bolkiah and toured a processing plant while discussing the stable exchange of urea for Australian food and agricultural products. Australia imported 65% of its fertilizer-grade urea in 2025 from countries in the Middle East, according to figures provided by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar contributed the largest share of value and volume, accounting for more than 55% of Australia's imports. Countries in Southeast Asia, though, were Australia's next largest sources. Hence, the whirlwind tour of Asia. Prime Minister Albanese said his visit to the Southeast Asian country of Brunei was aimed at softening the blow to Australia's from the Middle East war. He said in a statement, quote, engaging with critical regional partners such as Brunei and Malaysia will help Australia's energy supply remain secure during times of uncertainty. We are taking steps to reinforce relationships and engage with key partners to keep our fuel supply flowing, end quote. The next stop for the Prime Minister is Malaysia. Prime Minister Albanese is meeting with the Prime Minister of Malaysia today to discuss the supply of fuel and other critical goods between the countries. By the time this is released, by the time you're hearing this, he'll hopefully have secured supply contracts and will be heading home. Certainly, he'll be home by the time you listen to this on Saturday. But literally, just as we began recording, he announced that the government had secured an additional 100 million litres of diesel from in two shipments, one from Brunei, where he was yesterday, and another from South Korea. In a joint statement, Australia and Malaysia shared deep concern over the conflict in the Middle East and its escalation and consequences for the Asia-Pacific region, including the impact on energy supply and prices. As of right now, we don't know any deals that were signed in Malaysia. I imagine those are continuing on throughout the afternoon and into the evening local time. So hopefully we'll know more in the coming days. Currently, Malaysia is Australia's third largest source of refined fuels and supplies 10% of Australia's imports of fertilizer-grade urea. Australia supplies 95% of Malaysia's imported natural gas, so I feel like we have a pretty strong negotiating position with them. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Penny Wong, is also travelling with the Prime Minister and then will be headed on to Singapore to meet with her counterparts there. And we'll keep you up to date on how this story develops, if, quite frankly, there is much to talk about. Meanwhile, back home, fuel issues have forced the airlines to cut back on flights and increase fares. The price of jet fuel has shot up 150% in the Asia Pacific and Oceania region, according to the IATA, which is the highest surge in price for anywhere in the world. Well done us. Qantas will cut domestic flights due to higher fuel costs and uncertainty in the Middle Eastern war as it flags as much as an $800 million extra fuel bill. And that's only going to be passed on to the passengers, I imagine. I'm not sure they're going to cop that one.
I think you might be right there.
On Tuesday morning, Qantas said that to mitigate the impact of the conflict, it had increased fares, adjusted capacity, and made changes to its international flight network. It announced an increase in fuel cost estimates to as much as $3.3 billion for the second half of the financial year. Previously, it had estimated that would cost $2.5 billion. Qantas said that it was closely monitoring the fuel situation and working with the government and suppliers who will continue to provide confidence in fuel supply for the remainder of April and well into May. After that, who the hell knows? Virgin Australia has told the ASX yesterday in a press release that it would slightly reduce flights by 1% in 3 months to up to June 30. It is understood that this will involve a broad consolidation of flights to get more passengers onto planes across Virgin's mostly capital city-focused fleet. At this time, it's believed that no routes will be completely axed, but they haven't confirmed or denied this as of recording. After June, though, Virgin is in a much more precarious position, and we expect them to continue to trim their flight offering further, especially if they cannot secure fuel at the appropriate price. But of course, this isn't limited to just the Asia-Pacific region. Globally, airlines are following a similar pattern. Delta Airlines boss Ed Bastian warned that the US carrier will spend an additional $2.5 billion more on jet fuel just in this quarter alone. Understandably, they are a particularly large airline with a lot of planes, so you'd expect them to have a pretty big whack in fuel increase. So basically, more supply shot, more rising prices, but it does sound like the Prime Minister is at least attempting to do what he can in the region. Ardeet, are you pleased to see that the government is, well, trying to do something? You know, there's no certainty that any of these conversations and deals will actually happen when they arrive, but the fact that they're doing something, do you think that's a good thing?
Yes, I do think it's a good thing as much as the in this case, I'll call myself a bit cynical on this one. As much as the cynical side of me thinks it's probably unnecessary for Albo to be going over and be seen to be making these deals. I mean, he's not sitting there reading over the fine print of the contract, signing it, and co-signing with the the refiners over there and negotiating prices and everything. It's a show for him and it's a show for the leader of the other side. Unfortunately, it does seem to be a necessary part of the game where, you know, both leaders get to sort of toot their own horn. You know, Albo gets to say, I've gone over and made these deals. Well, no, you haven't. You've done the visit to give the face to the deal, but the boffins in the back rooms are the ones that are really sorting out the deals. And then for the Sultan of Brunei and was it Prime Minister of Malaysia?
Yes.
Yeah, Prime Minister of Malaysia. They get to say, well, I made a deal with them, and we've secured our supplies of liquid natural gas. So, look, in terms of the structure of the reality of the politics, I'm glad that they're doing something, because there would always be the chance of, if he didn't do it, it would be viewed as a snub, and if it was viewed as a snub, you might just go down the list one or two notches. So, I think it's important. I think it's good that he's doing it, and yeah, he seems to be doing. Seems to be going well at this, and it's what I think his job is. He has to do that. So that's good on that side. I think it's probably hasn't dawned on everybody the impact of the urea, the fertilizer, and the amount that it's necessary for Australia's food for local consumption and food for exports. It has made it into the news more, which is good. But it was one of the things that when it first came out, there was such a focus on the fuel that people didn't sort of give much thought to what's actually going to happen to our food. So you sort of have a double whammy where you've got transport, running of farm machinery being affected by fuel, and then the actual fertilizing of the crops being impacted as well. And who knows what the future will hold, but at this point, you can't get a kilo of urea from a solar panel or a wind turbine. That's just not the reality. In the future, sure, you'll be able to do that, or you'll be able to produce something that's nitrogen fixing, but you can't at the moment. We need fossil fuels for that, and I think it's probably dawning on some people as well. Behind the scenes as well, and I would be surprised if we don't cover this in the podcast in a few months, is going to start getting into things like plastics and pharmaceuticals, and chemicals required for catalysts for different manufacturing processes and that. So I'm saying watch this space, because I'd love to be wrong on this prediction. Would genuinely love to be wrong on this prediction. I don't see anything being settled in the next 3 months. I'm not seeing any sign at all that's giving me any great confidence that this mess is going to sort itself out. As I said, love to receive some emails in a couple of weeks from people saying you were wrong, and I'll say it on the podcast. But my prediction is nothing really settled for 3 months, and within that 3 months, the reason why I've picked that, I think it will probably go longer, but the reason why I think at least those 3 months is that's when we start to get a real stretch on fuel reserves. China's got they've got 3 months of supply as opposed to our 30 days of supply, and even though ours is getting topped up, it gets to the point where the amount coming in starts to turn into a drip, and those reserves start going down, and then we're also going to have the issue with things like urea and, as I said, the other things for pharmaceuticals and plastics and other parts of the industry. 3 months is going to be a period in which a lot of nations will really strongly feel the pinch, and I mean even places like say Saudi, those areas in the Middle East that do send us a lot of urea, and that they're also importing a lot of stuff. I mean, it's a little bit tricky to grow wheat in the desert, so it's a both way trade, and they can't buy wheat from us if we're not producing it. No. So I think we'll see a real strain on that. So I had a couple other things there, but let me pause for a moment and hear what you think about, give me on 2 things. Do you like what the government is doing? And what's your prediction on how long this shit fest is going to go for?
So a couple of things. I think you're very much right in that. Does Prime Minister Albanese need to be there signing these, doing the photo ops and stuff like that? Practically no, but I do think it is smart politics to be standing there going, I'm the leader of the country. I'm here sitting down with the leader of these countries, doing the thing, making the deals, show on his face. So smart politics, but it is that performative sort of politics. I think it's worth shouting out again that Minister for Foreign Affairs Penny Wong has probably been working with her team relentlessly to try and get some of these deals done, or at least get those conversations. Because at the end of the day, let's be very realistic here. We are most certainly not the only person making these phone calls to these countries going, hey, listen, we need fuel, we need supplies, and we're willing to pay for them. We are a big fish in the Asia Pacific, but we're not the only fish in the Asia Pacific. And so, and I don't think we probably have the quality of relationship as some of the other players do as well. So it's not all easy peasy. We can just find a solution to these problems overnight. I think there is a lot of work to be done, and I think it's worth credit where credit's due. I would imagine literally, as it is her job, Penny Wong and her team have probably done a lot of the heavy lifting here, and probably should get a lot of credit for it as well. Penny Wong is one of the few politicians that I genuinely think are very, very good at what they do, and I'm very glad to see that this appears to be, at least initially, a bit of a win on this World Will Win tour. Though I am curious to know, as this story sort of develops over the next day or two, what these deals are actually going to amount to, because we hold some pretty serious cards for countries like Malaysia. They import a lot of LNG from us, and will be looking to probably increase those imports. We have a lot of LNG, and we're in a very unique sort of situation here. Well, not completely unique, but you know what I mean. We're a big exporter of LNG products, is particularly in this region. So there is a lot of eyes shifting to us to do the same thing in their countries, and going, we need to shore up supplies. So there are deals to be made. There is opportunities here. And some of these deals will go beyond, these will become long-term potential, like, agreements that may go for years or decades, not just months. So there is opportunity here as well. I think that's good. I don't think it's necessarily going to be enough, though, and that's what concerns me. With the last of the ships that were en route before basically all of this happened, have arrived now. So this is when we're getting to the point where it's going to get much harder, it's going to get much more expensive, and everyone's sort of fighting over the limited supplies that exist. It's not super easy to, like, there's a certain amount of capacity in a lot of these systems that you can kind of ramp up, but taking 20% of the supply out of the system is generally beyond what a normal system can just increase to. So there is lots of talks around about increasing production, and here, there, and everywhere, and everyone's doing it. There's a lot of money to be made right now. I think the world economy will survive. It's going to hurt. I don't think this is going to get solved anytime soon. I did earlier today. I saw a Reuters article talking about how there's hope for peace with Israel and Lebanon, discussing ceasefire agreements and things like that. I don't, even if that happens, I don't know. I really don't see this wrapping up anytime soon. The US has moved 3 aircraft carriers into the region, and I think 50,000 troops and stuff like that. If anything, I think there might be another escalation brewing. That's certainly how it feels. But cooler heads may prevail. Frustratingly, the Trump team, had a quote unquote marathon negotiations of 21 hours or something like that. Generally, deals like a genuine peace agreement, it can take weeks or months to organize. The previous Iran nuclear deal, I think, was in the works for something like 10 years before everyone agreed on what was going on. So 21 hours is really not a marathon for diplomatic talks. That's why I'm sort of thinking that this may escalate again. Look, put it this way. My prediction is diesel, I should say, is probably not going to go under, let's say, I would say $3, but it's kind of dropped. There are places now where it's dropped down to that level. So let's say $2.50. It's not going to go under $2. That would have been my
guess as a base.
Yeah, it's not going to go under $2.50 in 2026. It's just not going to happen. And if we're lucky, into maybe next year, we might see it to come back down. But I'll be surprised if it'll even get back under $2 a litre by the end of next year. It wouldn't surprise me if we do have to start fuel rationing. I think when we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, when it all sort of began, I did sort of say after Easter we may go into fuel rationing. At this time, I think the government's done a really good job of kind of easing that fuel stress and securing supplies. How long they can continue to do that is the big question. And if they can't, fuel rationing is 100% on the table. It's going to happen.
Yep.
And I mean, in some ways, it kind of already has. You know, I went to the fuel station today to get diesel, and as listeners of the podcast sort of would have heard, I've got some agricultural equipment that runs on diesel. So it's not just my car that I'm filling up. Thankfully, though, those machines don't use a lot of fuel. They are quite fuel efficient. But I do regularly carry an empty jerry can, and when I go and fuel up, I'll fill it up, sort of thing. I definitely got some looks today as I filled up, and there was a sign on the Bowser that said you can only get 25 litres in a jerry can. I had a 20-litre jerry can, and I think I only put 19 litres or something in it because I'm not trying to stockpile fuel or anything like that. But there are a lot of people doing the wrong thing. We're still seeing it. Unfortunately, we are seeing people have their jerry cans stolen. A lot of people do drive around with 4-wheel drives with a jerry can on the back and things like that. People are getting desperate. It is happening. And so, you know, I don't think we're going to see the end of that for any time soon. I think, if anything, it might get worse before it gets better, particularly if the government doesn't extend the fuel excise reduction that they've done so far. I think it was smart just to do it for a couple of months and just see how things go. If that doesn't get extended and we're in a position where we are now, that's going to hurt a lot of people, particularly trucking, particularly freight trains. It's really gonna slow the economy down in a big way, and I think inflation is gonna take a big hit as well. So this may tip us into a recession, possibly. We won't know until it kind of has already happened. Frustratingly, recessions are kind of like retroactive things that we declare. Oh yeah, we were in a recession 3 months ago. Yeah, we all knew because chips were $8 a bag, and you know. But I do feel like we haven't fully recovered from COVID-19. I feel like certain things have, but a lot of other things, you know, the affordability crisis and all of that kind of stuff really hadn't caught up yet. And then this is just like a punch to the guts when you're already down. So there's a lot of people that are doing it tough already, and things aren't looking particularly great for the at least the 2026 calendar year. And I think with that, we're going to see a whole lot of shufflings. And our next story, we'll talk about some sort of silver linings that are coming out of this. But look, I'll throw it back to you. Do you feel similar in this way, or perhaps worse?
I have a little bit of a wait and see on the economic situation. I think we'll probably take a bit of a hit here. I think there's a number of different factors in regards to impacts we might be seeing from AI and robotics. So that's not really short term, but also with the US economy, which tends to impact us quite heavily here in Australia. I'm not, despite all the insanity, I'm not seeing anything to say that the US economy is slowing down in any dramatic way. I can see some corrections. I can see a bit of a move down, but from the people I listen to and what I read, there's no, and just how I look at the chart, I don't really see any strong signs that the US economy is particularly weak, and the metric that you often throw about in these situations is, okay, so who else is better? Who else are you going to be putting your money with? These banks, corporations, investors that you're literally talking hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars needing to go somewhere. The US is still a great pick. So there's a lot of strength still in the US. They're a long way from down, and if the US isn't going down, it's unlikely that we're going to be going down in any significant way. And I mean, that might sound a little bit contrarian given what we're seeing with the fuel prices and that. I do share your thing on the risk to inflation. Well, I mean, it's not even a risk. We're going to see an increase from inflation. The question is just how much. So I haven't reached a level of pessimism with it, but I'm in a bit of a cautious wait and see, and I don't expect any continuation of what we've seen with the stock market rises the last few years to that same angle, but I don't see any thing on the horizon for a dramatic retracement. Now, with that 3-month thing that I pulled out there, I'll have a different view in 3 months if it's still as pessimistic a situation as what I painted there. So I'm wait and see, DK, but I'm slightly more positive than negative at the moment.
Yeah, I guess I've got a bit more of a pessimistic view of things at the minute. I'm preparing for the worst but hoping for the best is probably the best way I can put it. But I am quite concerned because the fuel supplies thing is really where I'm sort of focused. If we do go into rationing, that's when I really feel the economy, I think, will slow down in a really big way. And I think that may tip us. I don't think there'll be a global recession in this way. Well, this is where it's hard to say because it's like, well, if this happens, then this will happen. As you know, things are a snowball event. I think if Australia could quite easily tip into one without other areas of the world going into one. Focusing on the US. The US may not, but we may. So I don't know. This very much is a wait and see situation. Who knows? It could all be solved tomorrow. Very unlikely, but stranger things have happened. Yeah. So who knows what the hell is going on? Certainly not us, and least of all economists. So let's move on. It's time now for our Two Ticks Town Talk.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man.
All right, this week's Two Ticks Town Talk. We're I'm travelling up to Toowoomba in Queensland. Now, while Toowoomba quickly became a city, it was a small settlement at the time of the story I'm bringing you this week. So a few details. It's a city on the border of southeast Queensland and the Darling Downs region, a rich agricultural region, 132 k's west of Brisbane, and its urban population in 2021 was 142,000, making it Australia's second most populous inland city after Canberra and the second largest regional centre in Queensland. So it's on the crest of the Great Dividing Range, and it's about 600 to 800 metres above sea level on the edge of a plateau. Got a whole lot of public parks, and it's known as Garden City due to its volcanic soil supporting extensive parkland. Tree-lined streets with jacaranda, camphor laurel and plane trees, and festivals such as the Carnival of Flowers in September. So it was settled in 1842, declared a municipality in 1860, a town in 1892, and a city in 1904. So that's a bit uncommon for a lot of the places that we hear on our Two Ticks Town Talks, but that just rocketed from settlement to city in, what's that, 62 years. That's pretty bloody quick.
Yeah.
Look, there's lush pastoral areas there, so people wanted to settle there. So prior to European settlement, the escarpment was home to the Barangum Aborigines, and the area was founded on the lands of the Jabal and Jarawar people, with Jabal extending south and Jarawar north of the city. The Ugarapul people of the Ugra language nation are traditional owners of the land near Tabletop Mountain. And the origin of the name Toowoomba is from the language of the local Barangum people, and it's been argued as to whether it means the swamp, a variety of melon which grows on the banks of the swamp, or the reeds on the edge of the swamp. So in the 1840s, Toowoomba was a stopping point from Moreton Bay on the east coast of Queensland to all those pastoral properties on the Darling Downs. Now, before I get into the story, one factoid of note suggests, and there's two other claims to this, but suggests that the Lemington, that our well-known Aussie treat, was first served in Toowoomba when Lord Lemington took his entourage to Harlaxton House to escape the steamy heat of Brisbane. So they're claiming that, and it seemed as good a story as the other two. So apparently he said to the cook, we need something. The cook said, oh God, and had a bit of a, all right, well, I've got this cake, I'm going to dip it in chocolate. And there was, I think his wife or another cook was familiar with using coconut in cooking, which was uncommon back then. They rolled it in there. It's like, oh, magnificent. So... Now, we often note in our Two Ticks Town Talks how poorly and tragically the interaction between Europeans and Aborigines turns out in Australian history. A lot of those form part of an overall history called the Frontier Wars. And just next to Toowoomba is where one of the best known battles took place. It's known as the Battle of One Tree Hill, and it's this week's Two Ticks Town Talk story or focus. So it took place on 12th of September 1843 at Tabletop Mountain, which is only about 10 k's from the centre of Toowoomba. And in those days, it was known as One Tree Hill. So it formed part of the Upper Brisbane Lockyer campaign and the War of Southern Queensland within the Australian Frontier Wars. The battle involved Aboriginal warriors led by Multugurra, who was a warrior, strategist and diplomat of the Ugarapul people, Ugarapul nation from the Ugara language nation. Multugurra was the son of a bloke called Old Moppy, who was a respected warrior in his own right. Multugurra united mountain tribes and clans, including at least 7 neighbouring groups, in an armed resistance against the Europeans. There's over 100 Aboriginal warriors from the mountain tribes alliance that participated in the battle. And then on the opposing side, there's British colonists, squatters and their servants. Initially 18 armed men guarding the 3 bullock drays pulled by about 50 bullocks with 35 to 50 reinforcements in the counterattack. The conflict escalated following the mass poisoning of approximately 50 or 60 Aboriginal people at Kilcoy Station in 1842 using flour laced with strychnine. So you can understand why Multugurra and his mob were had blood in their eyes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Multugurra had warned Europeans not to come through the area, but they ignored the threats. So he organised ambushes on supply drays along the mountain road that had been built for commerce between Moreton Bay and Darling Downs. In the initial ambush, the warriors placed logs across the road as barricades and attacked from concealment in the creek bed and thick bush on a steep and boggy stretch. The armed settlers, they were forced to stop and fled back to a place called Boniface Inn, 34 k's away, and abandoning the drays. So the warriors sacked the drays, drove off the bullocks, and held a corroboree, feasting on bullock meat. There was then a counterattack the following morning by 35 to 50 armed settlers and servants on horseback that surprised the Aboriginal camp at dawn. There was a number of warriors killed or wounded. They retreated up the steep slopes of One Tree Hill to a planned defensive position where they had stockpiled boulders and stones and spears. So from the high ground, they hurled the spears down, rocks and boulders at the pursuers, wounded several of the settlers. I don't know whether they made a note of it, including one in the buttocks. Which I don't know. It was in two sources that they met. It could have come from the same thing, but yeah, it was sort of...
Well, that sort of feels a bit weird, though, because was he running away? Like, how did they get him in the butt?
I don't know. They didn't go into that. I didn't even think that. He might have been running away. It might have just been bad luck, or he might have been showing off or something. Also, the rocks and that, which shattered some of the muskets, so it forced the advance to halt. So the settlers retreated. They bogged down in mud in places and camped at the initial ambush site. And then Border Police under Commissioner Stephen Simpson arrived the next day, but checked out the situation and said, no, not going to be doing another assault without reinforcements due to the barricaded road. So it's notable as one of the largest battles in the Australian frontier wars, and it was a rare pitched battles in which the Aboriginal forces comprehensively routed the colonists, and it represented organised Indigenous resistance that it was part of the resistance that delayed settlement in the Lockyer Valley and Darling Downs by about 15 years of armed conflict, which I didn't know it had gone on that. Well, it went on for a while, but 15 years in that area was a big impact. So, look, there was a large-scale settler response following the Battle of One Tree Hill, where they sent about 75 to 100 armed men, including soldiers from the 99th Regiment and police, with pursuit and camp raids that killed many of the warriors. So Mullingar escaped the October 1843 assault, but he was killed in 1846 during continuing raids in the area, and then smaller groups continued ambushes for another 5 years. A couple of details on Mullingar's leadership and strategies. So he was also known as Young Moppy after his dad, and he built on his dad's efforts to forge and lead a broad coalition known as the Mountain Tribes Alliance. So as I said before, that was seven and possibly more neighbouring clans, including from the Darling Downs, Lockyer Valley and surrounding areas. And there are estimates of the alliance's potential strength that it reached over 1,000 to 1,200 warriors at its peak, which is a lot of people in those days. So his primary strategic focus was targeting vulnerable supply lines from Moreton Bay to Darling Downs and Lockyer Valley. So he recognised that the single mountain road was essential for delivering food and tools and supplies to squatters while enabling the wool transport going back. So by disrupting those lines, he aimed to isolate and starve out the settlements, effectively placing large areas under siege through constant raids, ambushes and patrols. So he used key tactics of pre-battle warnings and psychological warfare. Like he said, explicit warnings to the Europeans saying, don't go here or bad things are going to happen. He used guerrilla ambushes and was master of the terrain. So using the falling logs, sapling barricades, fenced side roads to block and immobilise bullock drays on steep boggy or thickly brushed sections, attacking from concealed positions, and exploiting surprise and close quarter weapons like spears. He also understood defensive high ground positions and improvised weapons, as we said, when they'd retreated to a place they'd already planned and already had the rocks and boulders and spears already up there. He was apparently good at feigning retreat and luring enemies into kill zones or traps for further rocks from above. He had employed raiding disruption tactics where he'd do like lightning raids on outstations and sheep runs, keep settlers pinned to their huts for days while they took their livestock. And arguably one of his biggest skills was that he was a real diplomat and spiritual leader, unifying disparate groups for collective action and keeping that resistance going even after personal losses. He did encourage use of traditional magic and claimed abilities like stopping bullets, which boosted morale. But his campaigns involving these hit-and-run actions and evasions and continued ambushes were immensely successful. So he used those, and it made the Battle of One Tree Hill one of the rare, clear Indigenous victories in the Australian frontier wars, where, as we know from previous Two Ticks Town talks, it really didn't go well. But here, the settlers were routed in both ambush and counter-attack. We don't often get a chance to cover successful pushbacks against European settlement, but it's part of our history, and hopefully you found something you didn't know in this week's Two Ticks Town Talk on Toowoomba in Queensland.
Very interesting. You're right. We don't hear very often about the well, I think partially because it was quite rare. There was obviously a significant technological divide between what a lot of the Aboriginal people, the native indigenous people of Australia had compared to a lot of the settlers. And I still cannot get over the fact that a lot of European settlers had firearms, amongst other things. A lot of miners had explosives and things like that. But Aboriginals would still not necessarily fully understanding exactly what was going on. Stick goes bang and old mate's dead, but still we're prepared to fight against this. I think that takes real courage. That's a lot of balls to run in against and absolutely fiercely defending what they rightfully saw as theirs. I think that's something we don't, talk about probably enough. The courage of these men to protect what their home, essentially. And depending on how you feel about it, whether that's fortunate or unfortunately, they quite often lost. And this is a rare situation where they essentially didn't. I am curious, very much so, about how old mate got his buttocks speared, I assumed.
Maybe it was running away, taking off downhill. I mean, that would have been. You would have had I can imagine there being a certain arrogance, thinking, "Oh, there's plenty of us, and we've got the guns," and then being in a situation thinking, "Oh, hang on, we've just been led into a situation where we're now downhill, and we've got these bloody boulders rolling down the hill. We've got muskets shattering around us. We've got people getting speared or spears falling down. We're getting hit in the head with rocks, and that it would." I can understand a few of them thinking, "Nah, out of here."
Yeah. No, 100%. Especially, you're right. When you've got that degree of technological superiority, the last thing you expect is that, right? I do wonder about the buttocks thing now that I say that. If
You're obsessed with these buttocks.
Well, I'm curious as to know why they mention it in multiple sources, and I am wondering if...
That's why I mentioned it, because it was mentioned a couple of times, and I didn't understand what the attraction was. in something so serious. Maybe it was just one of those things of because it's Australian history, there's a certain amount of that just juvenile amusement that I could have even. I did read somewhere else, and I hadn't got in there that sometimes the Aboriginals would taunt them by showing them their buttocks, maybe a la. What was that Mel Gibson one?
Braveheart.
Yeah, a la that Braveheart thing. So who knows? Maybe he thought, I'll show my bum back to them, and regretted it.
Perhaps. I do wonder that if it's because it would be seen as he was retreating and they still attacked him. So maybe that's why it was mentioned multiple times going, look, see, he was running away and they still had a go at him. I don't know. That's speculation on my part.
Yeah, okay, I can see that angle too.
Yeah, but maybe not. It does seem kind of funny. So, but no, very interesting. I do think there is this sort of a myth in the Australian sort of the stories we tell about our country where we forget how fierce resistance was fought against settlement of Europeans here in Australia. I think a lot of people still don't fully understand or appreciate the fact that it wasn't a peaceful settlement of the country. It was often very violent from both sides, but primarily I would say a lot of it was instigated by the European settlers, but not totally. And so this is a different story than we normally told. So very good. All right, let's move on. Chinese automaker BYD is tripling its shipment volume of electric vehicles to Australia to 30,000. That's right. BYD is shipping 30,000 vehicles to Australia across May and June in response. So to clarify, that is only over that month period in response to record fuel prices driving a sales spike, which saw it finish third in overall sales last month. This is huge. The bulk order is roughly triple the brand's typical shipment volume following its second best monthly sales result and ramped up supply of new models such as the Shark 6 Ute and the Sea Lion 8 7-seater SUV. Speaking through an interpreter at the 2026 Melbourne Motor Show, BYD Asia Pacific Managing Director, and I apologize because I'm probably going to butcher this, Lu Xinglang told media, including Car Expert, that the automaker was preparing to ship a record number of vehicles following an unprecedented customer demand. I'm not sure that it's unprecedented. I think if you look around at what's going on, it's kind of expected. But anyway, I digress. BYD delivered an all-time best of 7,217 vehicles locally last month behind Toyota and Kia, up 50% year on year, following 5,001 and 5,323 deliveries in January and February, respectively. While BYD is making headlines in 2025 for widespread stockpiling of vehicles, including in the parking area of a theme park south of Sydney, the recent sales surge has significantly reduced its inventory levels. Of course, what's the point of selling cars if you've got no cars to sell? BYD also said that the increased volume will ensure faster customer deliveries, including for its Denza luxury brand. And just as a side note, I've looked at some of those Denza vehicles, and they, at surface level, they do look very good. They are priced, we're getting up there in price. Not quite into the six-figure range, but very not far off it. But their offering is pretty significant. I wouldn't mind going and taking one for a test drive. BYD's
a lot of the BYDs, nothing to be seized at all.
They do offer some very, very good cars at the moment, and I do think this is something we're going to see their quality continue to increase year on year, as we're seeing. They seem to be speed running it, though, compared to if we look back to the Japanese automakers and then the Korean automakers after them, we sort of had this slow progression of kind of average vehicles into some more quality to leading brands. China does seem to be speed running this at the minute, though, particularly BYD. BYD's year-to-date sales at the end of March totaled 17,541 compared to only 8,767 at the same point last year. That's an increase of 100.1%. It delivered 52,000 vehicles in 2025 and is on track to deliver its 100,000th vehicle in Australia later this year, having sold its first locally in only 2022. Which is...
Wow, that's not long ago.
It's insane. Like I said, they're speed running their way to number one seller. It's genuinely insane. The Sea Lion 7 electric SUV has been a bestseller ahead of the Shark 6 plug-in hybrid Ute and the Sea Lion 6 plug-in hybrid SUV. BYD's sales contribute to a Chinese-made vehicles outselling all others for the first time in February 2026. And this followed Chinese brands overtaking Japanese automakers to become the number one source of new vehicles globally for the first time in 2025. Though I do want to caveat that figure because I do believe that includes Chinese domestic consumption, which is at an all-time high.
Right. Okay. Still a sale.
It is still counts, still significant. They still claim the top spot. But if we kind of put it into that little bit of context, after becoming a top 10 brand locally last year with over 52,000 sales, BYD is aiming for the podium in 2026 with the help from at least 8 new models, placing it alongside the likes of Mazda, Kia, and Ford. But of course, still behind the leading market leader, the number one automaker, our favorite car company in Australia. Do you want to guess what it is?
Oh, it got to be Toyota, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be Toyota. Oh, what a feeling, Toyota. This segment is sponsored by Toyota.
No. That's right. No, it's not DK, but I do love my Toyota.
I currently don't own a Toyota. I have owned them in the past, though, and they are quite good. All of this comes as EV trucks are gaining ground here in Australia. Uptake is still slow, though, and sales are increasing. You got to start somewhere. Battery power is still a small fish in the market, dominated by diesel, but for the first month ever, trucks that run entirely on electricity accounted for more than 1% of new truck sales, which, look, I know 1% is nothing, but, in the space of this time last year, they weren't even 1%, right?
Well, you don't get to 10 unless you get to 1, do you?
Exactly. So there is an uptake. There are more models on the market, and I think this is one that we're going to see start moving quite quickly, actually. Meanwhile, in the space of only 5 years, electric truck sales in China went from basically nothing to over 230,000 trucks sold in 2025 alone. That is more than a quarter of all truck sales. So it is predicted that this year, their sales in China will surpass the sales of diesel trucks for the first time ever, which is quite incredible. So I think there's a couple of things we need to put into context and consider here, particularly for our international listeners. Firstly, here in Australia, we do not have a domestic car manufacturing industry anymore. So there isn't anything for us to protect. And quite frankly, more competition in the market is a good thing, even if you're a bit skeptical about the country of origin that these vehicles are coming from. Secondly, the current energy crisis has shown us once again how valuable EVs can be and energy independence can be as well. There is a great desire, I think, for people to have that energy independence and peace of mind, pretty much. I know personally of 2 people that went and bought EVs. They were thinking about getting a new car earlier this year, and this has actually prompted them to make that jump into the EV market, mostly because of that energy independence and that peace of mind of going, I don't need to stress. It wasn't even really a big cost factor. It was more I don't want to have the stress of the energy crisis that's going on, and there is no other option available to me that can give me this sort of level of this personal level of energy independence outside of my house in terms of transport. So this is what I'm going with. So, and I think that mindset has really changed over the last few years. We've it started with solar panels on your roof, and then it became home batteries, which we've seen a huge uptake of. And now it's moving into the EV transport realm as well. So I think this is a trend we're going to see continue. But what about you? How do you think about this? And would you consider buying an EV vehicle?
Would I? Well, first off, would I consider buying an EV vehicle? Mrs. Ardeet's tossing up whether or not she's going to be getting a new vehicle in the next year or two, and the desire is to at least get a hybrid. So that's not a full EV, but it's a change in thinking that's very different to what we had. Say 7 years ago. 7 years ago would have been not even on the cards. Whereas now it's a case of, they're getting reasonable range. I mean, when you've got a hybrid, your battery power, your range on your battery is not as high as a full EV, but it's getting better and better, and it will cover a lot of sort of shortish sub 200 kilometre trips, which covers a lot of ground for a lot of people, particularly when you bring it back home, when you can just plug it into your own power supply, which if you're fortunate enough to have it as we do, it'll be your own solar panels. So there's a combination of the capacity has gone up has increased, the prevalence of home batteries, the prevalence of home solar power, and the increase in infrastructure. And I know there's that thing of, like say if you want to drive from Melbourne to Sydney, you've got to make at least one, maybe two stops somewhere, and that might sort of take you half an hour. But the thing that people sort of skip over with that is you can do it. You've literally got that option at several places. You don't have to just say, oh, well, look, I have to stop at Holbrook and then stop at Yass, and that's my only options. You've got options for recharging your EV all along the route. And most of the time you want to have a bit of a break and a leg stretch after a few hours anyway, and particularly if you get one of these higher charging higher what they call not high like they charge you fast charging type of stations. You can throw enough in there to get you to the next place where you want to rest and not have to spend a hell of a lot of time. So obviously it's still a little bit of it in its infancy, but the fact of the matter is, despite the criticism, it's doable, it's possible, and the infrastructure is there. So, to me, a hybrid is definitely on the cards, and it's quite possible that if another year goes by, we might even see something that convinces us to go fully electric. So, I sort of got my old Prado, which has got the diesel, and I'm sort of happy with that and what that does at the moment. But the other one, which Miss Ardeet's car, definitely for her needs. She does a fair bit of running routes around, so she does need, very comfortable mileage from it. But all those concerns are getting addressed. Your other question was what was how do I feel about these the ones and that coming in? I think the EV trucks is probably the exciting part of it for me. Look, I have I have some concerns of the country of origin of China with some of these products. There's mates of the podcast know that we have concerns about the influence of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, on their industry as a whole. So there will always be that. When you talk about the actual practical side, there's a number of Chinese manufacturer brands out there. Some of them that I think I don't really know much about makes me doubt how you'd go for spare parts and that. But BYD has established itself as a premium brand. I mean, it's got penetration into, the Europe, the US market, Southeast Asian market. And, it's one of those things that people would love to bag out if they could. But I've got to say, I just don't hear or read any real bagging out of BYD as a brand. And in fact, I've spoken to a couple of people. In fact, I bailed up a bloke at the car park who had the BYD truck, and he was telling me about it, and it was a hybrid, and how most of the time it's just using the electric oil, but it's good for the trips. And I was a little bit surprised that some of its towing capacity and weight thing wasn't as high as what you would expect looking at the size of the truck. But it was decent enough, and then the fit out and the interior, it's all really good quality in terms of what you're paying, and particularly when you then compare it to some of the other brands. So regardless of how things might be being subsidised and influenced and that, just looking at the BYD on the factory floor compared to other brands and what's being offered, it's really good value for money, and I can understand why people would go for it. And to hear that their EV trucks are starting to increase in popularity doesn't surprise me at all. We've really, as a culture, we've moved very strongly to a delivery culture. You get your stuff online. There's, people our age probably have never ever interacted with couriers and deliveries as much as in their previously in their life as what we have in the last 15 years. And that's only growing. It's just becoming a part of it. And to do that, you've got to have the trucks, you've got to drive around. And I can well and truly understand the couriers and that, thinking, well, if I can get a good EV, get my reliance on fuel taken out of the equation, possibly be doing some charging at home or at the depot, or getting sort of reduced fuel costs or reduced costs there, doesn't surprise me at all. And it's you don't get the pollution. That is, that's another thing. It does help with the pollution and the emissions. So for me, the one that I really particularly am keeping an eye on and wanting to see succeed is the electric trucks, and to see that the long haul trucks are starting to become an option. What I was talking about before was more sort of like the urban ones for deliveries and that, but seeing that the long haul trucks, they're just on the cusp of becoming price competitive. I think that's another exciting area to watch. That transport side is really the one where there's the big gain to be made. So yeah, so look, I suppose that's a very positive. Got the big kevs about the EV trucks, and I'm impressed with what I see with BYD. So what about you? How do you feel about this change in our automotive culture, and what's your opinion on the resounding success of BYD?
frustrated with BYD because I think their website's a bit crap.
Oh, there you go.
But otherwise, the thing is I don't want to like their vehicles. Like I genuinely, I don't like the CCP. I don't like. I understand that. You know, the CCP is really pushing electric vehicles and trying to dominate the market and so on and so forth. Like, I get there's manipulation. It isn't proper free market capitalism that the Chinese country exists in. It's a what do they call it? A mixed economy or something like that. So I'm not a fan. I don't like their sort of totalitarian ideas and culture and all of that kind of stuff. But if you put that aside for a second, the offering that they do provide you with, like, value for money is astounding. Like, you can't get anywhere close to that for the price point for what you get anywhere else. And I haven't driven a BYD, but I do know a couple of people that have them, and actually I might hit them up to have a bit of a go. Everything seems fine. Like, I haven't heard of any major catastrophic. Some of the other Chinese automakers, yes, but BYD does seem to be the exception here. They do seem to have a really quality product. They're not the cheapest on the market in terms of Chinese automakers available here in Australia. But when it comes to just pure EVs or the couple of hybrids that they do offer, they do seem to be in a significantly better than some of their competition, particularly from China, and I think that kind of sets them apart, and that's given a lot of Aussies confidence in their product. Yes, they're still very new to Australia. They've only been here. This is their 4th year, but they've been around in China for quite a long time, and they're not all complete scrap heap hunks of junk after a few years. There's a lot of BYD. Again, I'm not a huge fan, right? But I can't deny the facts that are in front of me. There is a lot of BYD EVs still getting around Japan. I think it's too early for me to buy one.
Japan.
In China. Sorry, not Japan. Yeah. Not Japan. There is still a lot of BYD EVs, older BYD EVs getting around. And so, and I think that's for a lot of people, that's sort of like the mark of quality, you know. How many... A good example is there's another Chinese automaker that purchased the naming rights of a legacy British brand, MG. There is not a lot of older Chinese MGs getting around.
No, I've got a bit of a... I'm not a fan of them. Yeah.
So they're look, and they're priced very cheaply. There's a lot of them around. Their newer models, I think, are a lot better than some of their introduction models, but there aren't a huge amount of them. You don't see many that are more than, say, 3 or 4 years old. And that's a big red flag, right? That says to me, quality is subpar, blah, 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 blah. And you can find a lot of reviews online that say the same thing.
Yes,
people are talking about it, right? This isn't... If you buy one of them today expecting to buy a really good quality car, shame on you, because you should have done your research, quite frankly.
But if you know what you're getting and think, listen, I'm buying something that's got a warranty, that's going to be, tick my boxes on this thing, and beyond that, I don't really care. Well, I can understand you pulling the trigger on that one, but for you and me, it's not. I thought when you were going to jump to an example, I remember a number of years ago, Great Wall, and I don't even know if Great Wall is still a.
They very much are. Yeah.
Oh, they are. They are. Yeah. Okay. Seeing a Great Wall ute, and it looked like, it just looked like a typical flat tray ute. And I remember first it was Great Wall, and at first I thought it was, like Noosh Pub or something, some sticker on there saying, this is a Great Wall ute, until I realised, that's the actual car brand. And what struck me at the time was seeing a number of them about, not a huge number, but seeing a number of them about, and there was no rubbishing whatsoever of them. They just came in, they obviously did the job very well, and that was the first time I was really aware of Chinese automotive imports to Australia, and that stuck in my head, and I thought, they've worked out, they've done that leap ahead. They haven't had to go through that acceptance thing. They've gone straight to, these are all right, which is sort of framed my mindset for these BYDs.
Yeah, so Great Wall is now rebranded here in Australia to GWM.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
what that stands for, Great Wall Motors. And they are a very popular ute. The Cannon, I think it's called, is a very popular ute here in Australia. And it is pretty good. I think value for money is pretty good. Like, it's not, they are quite cheap, but they're not crap anymore. And this is the thing I was sort of mentioning about China is kind of speed running at a pace we've never really seen before. They've introduced some crap stuff, and people, they've sort of, people have bought them and gone, oh, this is crap. And then they're not coming back, and that word of mouth gets out, and that hurts the sales. And so I think certain Chinese brands, Great Wall is a good one. BYD seems to have learned this lesson before they've come to the Western markets, where the brand matters. People care about the brand names because it comes with an assurance of quality. That's why brands exist. You can't just keep throwing crap at us, no-name brand stuff crap at us, and expect us to continuously to consume it. So BYD, I think, has come at this from I think this has kind of helped BYD because they are a battery manufacturer, not an automaker that has decided to transition into manufacturing cars, as opposed to a car manufacturer that's now trying to start to build EVs. So they've looked at it in a different way. And I think that's actually really helped them come to market. BYD batteries are in a lot of stuff for a long, long time. So they already produce a quality product. And then they've sort of brought that over. So it actually hasn't surprised me that BYD is kind of dominating the market here in Australia. It's an established brand. They've understood sort of that Western thinking about brands and quality and all of those sorts of things. And they've brought that philosophy to the market. And it seems to be paying off for them for now. Look, we'll see long term what that's going to mean. I'm quite enthusiastic about where these brands are going. And again, as much as it kind of pains me to say so, because of my intrinsic hatred for the CCP, but ultimately, they are doing quite well. They seem to be so far, and this could change, but so far they do seem to be becoming a genuine market leader with a very attractive price proposition. And they're giving us the features we want. They're giving us the quality that we expect at a price that is much cheaper than, say, European or Japanese counterparts. So I'm sort of going, I'm quite a ways off from buying a car. I'll probably look at, my wife got one last year, so she's way off getting a new car. But I'm I want a ute. I'm not a huge fan of the Shark, the BYD's ute offering. I like the idea of it's that hybrid. It's got a motor in it that's a generator for the electric drivetrain. I do like that idea. I think that's kind of the best of both worlds. But I think their off-road performance is a bit average. They're working on that though, and they're planning apparently to release a bigger, better model in the next 12 months. And so that may be attractive to me. So I think what's surprising about the Chinese automakers as well is how quickly they're moving. They are on a different level compared to what we've ever seen before. So I think it's quite exciting. And I think a lot of Aussies are keen to sort of jump on this bandwagon. I don't think I would say the average person probably doesn't have the hang-ups that I do about supporting the CCP and things like that. They just want a good car at a good price. And for a lot of people, they don't really care where it comes from. And so this isn't surprising to me, and I think it's going to continue to grow, quite frankly. It really wouldn't surprise me if BYD becomes a podium finish this year and maybe into next. And once the word gets out of the quality and people start trying things and hire cars and so on and so forth, it's just going to go from strength to strength. So, look, we'll see what happens, but I think this is a little bit of a silver lining for the energy crisis that transition into EV vehicles.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. It's time for This Week in Australian History.
Right, this week in Australian history, we're covering 10th to the 16th of April. April 10th, 1851, the New South Wales Association for Preventing the Renewal of Transportation sends a petition to Queen Victoria, and they're against the resumption of convict transport to Eastern Australia. 1941, the Siege of Tobruk begins. And for most of the siege, Tobruk was defended by the Australian 9th Division under General Sir Leslie Morshead. And the Rats of Tobruk, as they got known, held the Libyan port against Axis forces for 240 days, a key Allied victory in North Africa, and a big morale booster, which you can never underestimate the power of that in something like a war,
especially a siege type scenario. Too.
Yeah. It's just something that just, they were obviously spreading it by the media they had at the time, but it spreads by word of mouth, and it really does motivate a lot of fellow Defence Force personnel. There's a big value to it. April 11th, 1921, Bert Hinkler flies from Sydney to Bundaberg non-stop, breaking his own long-distance flying record. 1934, Charles Ulm successfully delivers the first airmail from Australia to New Zealand. And partnering with Charles Kingsford Smith, Ulm's Trans-Tasman flight advanced commercial aviation links between the two countries. April 12th in 1851, between 7th and 12th of April, 4 ounces of gold were won at what would become the township of Ophir in New South Wales, and that was the first payable gold to be won in New South Wales and in Australia. And as astounding as this might be to you, DK, it sparked a gold rush.
Wow, you wouldn't say.
Yeah, who would have thought? 1924, the battlecruiser HMAS Australia is scuttled off Sydney Heads, deliberately sunk to comply with the Washington Naval Treaty limiting naval arms, which I know nothing about. But that's why. Do you know about it?
Yeah, and I have mixed
feelings
about it.
Of course you do. Oh, give us a quick 60 seconds.
I have so much to say about it. I think.
Okay.
I don't know that I could sum it up in 60 seconds. I think long term, it basically was like, look, after World War I, let's just downscale everyone's navies because it was a big contributing factor to the First World War. Everyone's building big ships, trying to, the Germans were building the Kriegsmarine to fight the Royal Navy and so on and so forth, right? So the Washington Navy Treaty was like everyone signs a deal saying we're not doing this, we're all downscaling our navies, so on and so forth. And unfortunately, HMS Australia was a casualty of that. Though, to be fair, she was probably getting a little bit long in the tooth anyway, and does Australia really need a ship of that size? And so on and so forth. So it didn't really do what it was supposed to do, and it kind of limited some things, and countries didn't agree to it, and so on and so forth. So I don't know. I have lots of thoughts on it, and look, if you have thoughts on the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 and you want to discuss it with me, feel free to email us at australiatalks@proton.me. I'd love to talk to someone about this for a very long time. I'm sad to see. I would have liked to have seen HMS Australia become a museum ship or something like that.
Right.
Which it could have been. It didn't have to be so, but Yeah, anyway.
April 13th, 1829, Melbourne's first post office opens. 1841, the first photograph was taken in Australia by visiting naval captain Augustin Lucas, and the daguerreotype was an image of a Sydney Sydney Harbour scene. So that marked the introduction of photography to the colony just a couple of years after it was invented in France, which you might have guessed by the word daguerreotype. 1855, the University of Melbourne was established by Act of Parliament of Victoria. April 14th, 1870, gold is discovered in Golgan, New South Wales. And not to sort of shock you too much, DK, it sparked a major gold rush in the area, a township, and which is moralised in Henry Lawson's writings and photos by Buffy Merlin, who I don't actually know who that is. I didn't have that more details on them. But so, yeah, now the Golgan's now a heritage listed gold rush town. 1986, the second trial of former Attorney General of Australia and High Court Judge Lionel Murphy begins in Sydney. He was accused of attempting to pervert the cause of justice, but was later acquitted. There's controversy and polarising opinions about his acquittal, but, you know, they went through the system, and that's what he got. April 15th, 1903, electric trams begin operating in Bendigo. 1944, Fred Patterson is elected to the Parliament of Queensland, representing the seat of Bowen, and he remains the... have a guess. You might probably remember this. Yeah, okay, there you go. So he remains the only member of the Communist Party of Australia to ever be elected to an Australian Parliament. Up there, good old commie Queensland. Communism and corruption. That's what we know them for.
Queensland is such just an absolute wild west of politics. I love it so much because it's all over the place politically. Yeah, but it's always extreme. I think that's the takeaway. Like it's never just run of the road. You don't get many neoliberals or neoconservatives. It's always one extreme or the other. You know? We'll give you Fred Patterson and Pauline Hanson. Like, come on.
1999, a massive hailstorm hit Sydney, with most of the damage being centred on the eastern suburbs, and the storm caused over $1.7 billion in damage. So it, destroyed thousands of homes and cars and aircraft at Sydney Airport. Unsurprisingly, one of the costliest natural disasters in Australian history at the time. And finally, April 16th, 2003, the Australian Army's Special Operations Command begins a 4-day chase of the North Korean ocean freighter Pongsu off the coast of Lorne, Victoria. And the operation involved them getting onto the vessel, which they suspected of drug smuggling, and that led to arrests and highlighted Australia's maritime security challenges. And it was a rare high seas pursuit by Australian forces, underscoring the international drug trafficking routes. And while some drugs were illegal, not every drug is illegal, and I reckon there would have been one or two stories told about that pursuit over a few coldies back on land. What do you reckon, DK?
100%. I know for a fact there were. All right, that sound is, of course, the 4X bottle top question. So blow the top off a couple of cold ones. grab a very comfy chair if you're not already seated and get ready with your thinking caps. So today we've got 3 questions. They are in no particular order. I think the last one is probably the easiest, but here we go. And actually 2 of these I'm pretty sure we've done before, so hopefully your memory is quite good.
Ha! After all this time, you shouldn't remember that it's not.
What? Question 1. This is... I'll give you a little hint. This is a little bit of a trick question. What is the highest mountain in Tasmania?
Oh. My first instinct is to say Cradle Mountain, but... bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, I'll give you a hint. It's not Cradle Mountain, but it is part of the Cradle Mountain Lake St. Clair National Park, if that helps you at all. Which I don't know how familiar you are.
I can feel the confidence draining out of me with every part of that description. I didn't even know. I have no idea on that one.
Yep, that is fair. I also had no idea. My answer to that would be Cradle Mountain, because it's like the only one I know in Tasmania.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's part, but
it is called Mount Ossa. It is 1,617 meters above sea level, and as I said, it is located within the Cradle Mountain Lake St. Clair National Park in the Central Highlands. But officially, it is the tallest one.
Did you say Ossa or Otter?
Ossa. O-S-S-A. Yeah.
Ossa. Okay.
All right. Question 2. Australia is the world's 4th largest exporter of what drink?
Oh, we did have this before. God, am I going to make the same mistake? I think it's wine.
It is. Well done.
I think I had that in the back of my head thinking, God, was that it was ringing a faint bell. We discussed it, or it was a trivia question. I can't remember. I remember thinking, oh, no, that's right. I jumped to something else. And when you said wine, I thought, oh gosh, of course. In fact, I think I got it wrong before. So
I think you did. I think I did ask you this once before, which means I need a better source for my trivia questions.
It gave me a bit of a go.
Yes, it is wine. These figures are a couple of years old. Unfortunately, I couldn't find super new figures, but in 2024, Australia exported $1.9 billion worth of wine. Number 1 spot is obviously France, but we're comfortably in number 4. Like to see those numbers get up there. We do love our wine here in Australia. Because it is relatively cheap compared to all the other grog. I think that's part of the reason.
It's damn good quality.
It is good quality.
Very hard to go wrong with a mid-priced Australian wine. And the lower priced ones stack up against other lower priced ones, and the higher priced ones are hold their own with others. But if you got that on that option on the menu, you get a couple of basics there, and you're nearly always guaranteed a good drop.
You're not wrong. And I actually, in my retirement, I would love to run a winery. Actually, now that I say that, I feel like that sounds much more romantic than the reality of running a winery.
Yeah, I think so.
I think a lot of wine would be drunk by me and not a lot of song.
Look, I think that's basically all you need to do for a winery. Plant a few vines, and then once a year drink a whole lot of wine and chuck it into a barrel. I think it's pretty much as simple as that.
I think you can claim that as a winery, right? You know, not a successful winery, but I do run a winery. All right, last question. Melbourne is obviously in Australia. It has the largest population of which nationality outside of Europe? And actually, It is the third highest population of this nationality. I've butchered this. It's the third largest city in terms of population of this group, this nationality, anywhere in the world. So it is significant.
I thought I knew the answer, and then when you said outside of Europe, you confirmed it through. I believe it's the Greek mob.
It is the Greeks.
Yeah.
So Melbourne, even in Greece, Melbourne is known as the third city. There are over 170,000 people of Greek ancestry in Melbourne. It's huge. It is.
Well, that's a lot.
It really is. It is the third most populous Greek city in the world. And it's here in sunny Australia. And we love our Greek immigrants that moved over here and gave Australia a hell of a lot that we take for granted today, including a lot of food culture and coffee. They really helped cement, obviously not just the Greeks, the Italians as well, and others, but the Greeks really helped perpetuate that throughout the country and really cemented it in Melbourne. So cool. Well done. 2 out of 3. Not bad. The first one, if you got that, I'd mind blown, to be fair.
A good question, because I thought, Mount Cradle, I'm actually going to nail this one. Cradle Mountain, I should say.
Trick question.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us for another Australia Talk. If you have any feedback or suggestions for topics, please get in touch with us on our email at australiatalks@proton.me. We'd also be grateful if you could subscribe and give us an honest review, as this helps us out immensely. But the best thing you can do for the podcast is just share it with a friend that you think might like it. Otherwise, join us next week for another episode of Australia Talks. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget, tell your mum I love her.
Thank you, DK. I'm going to see if I can track down some nuts for a 43-inch wrench.